Hi there. Welcome to the New Life Wellness Podcast. Today we have Brandon Montero, and we're gonna dive into some mind, body, and wellness, and a little bit of a journey. And we'll see where that takes us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming and doing this. Like we were just talking about, I've always wanted to be able to have a conversation with you to get to know you more because you've always been somebody in our group of circle that doesn't just keep things on the outside. Whenever we're together, you've always really internalized the moment that we're in, and your heart is always in it, and I can feel that. And that's a that's somebody that you've always been somebody in our friends circle that I've really looked up to in our community. Um, just for who you are and who you care, you truly care. And I really resonate with that, and I appreciate who you are.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much for that. And I would say, thanks for noticing, I guess. Maybe not everybody always sees what you're trying to do as a human being. Maybe it doesn't always come across that way. And so I appreciate that very much. And I would say that, one of my primary comments to you is I really like the way that you care about people, right? When you walk up to someone and you give them a smile or you give them a hug, like there's a real moment for and about that person, and you paused long enough to be like, how do I feel about this person that I'm hugging? And when you're the one getting hugged, you know that that is really about you. It's not just a like, this is what we
Superficial.
do, moving on. And so I appreciate that as well. And I guess that is probably why I would say I feel like I get the opportunity to be seen or noticed by you, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
in that way. And I appreciate it as much, just as well.
On that topic, what kind of, I know, like, for me, like, I grew up in like high school, in middle school. I got beat up a lot. I got called names a lot. I didn't quite fit in, and like I didn't ever want to make anybody feel like they weren't a part of their community. Like I felt so distant from when I was growing up as a child. did did what was your what brought you to, like, you having that perspective of wanting to care about people and wanting to be there for them, and inclusion, and like truly actually care about how a person is doing?
Yeah. Well, you know, what brought somebody anywhere,
Yeah.
right, is everything up until now. And so, of course, a big question. I would say that it's really relevant that I was raised very religiously, was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. And if you know about that religion, one of the primary things that they believe in, this is not to say anything negative, it's factual, I was there, right?
Yeah.
Is that they're no part of the world. And so people that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses are worldly people. And, although they might preach to them, that is like a world of, potential bad association or, things that you really shouldn't interact with. And so that is what I was raised to believe, although I remember always thinking that it wasn't very loving, right? Or maybe that I would meet people or friends that I thought were great. But the message that was reinforced to me was that likely they weren't truly great in a way that would be beneficial to you, right? And so, that was kind of sad, but also, of course, as you're growing up, well, that really others you from the rest of the world. you know they don't participate in after school anything, sports clubs, any of those kinds of things, because kind of going back to the like association. And so I really, couldn't invite somebody over to my house, like any of that stuff, right? My only friends could be from that particular religion. And so you're really kind of like isolated from the rest of the world, and kind of feel like an alien a little bit, right? Um, and I would say that as time went on and I started to grow up in that religion, um, I recognized like what was expected of me, and the fact that I could create like a face for myself to live in, and that face could be what was expected of me. I could create the person on the outside that could check the boxes, and that could like, I get where you want me to be or how you want me to act or not act, and I can do those things. But internally, I just didn't feel like that was me.
Mhm.
I always felt like that was a facade that I created, but like a great one. I could nail that facade. People would tell me inside that religion, you're doing great, great, you're a great example. But it wasn't me.
Yeah.
It was not, it was just someone else, um, and so that was my experience for a long time, as I grew up. And this kind of relates to a later topic that I'm interested in sharing. But in that religion, you don't have sex until you're married. In fact, like you can't hardly even date somebody because um, they don't really have parties. Everything has to be in conjunction with a chaperone or like a group of friends, and so like you
So
don't
you're
really
really
date.
confined.
Yeah, there's, you don't, even if you were to make out with somebody, you would get in trouble, perhaps, censured for a certain amount of time. If you were to have sex, you could be kicked out of the religion for an amount of time unless you exhibited a certain level of repentance. And so, like, they really toe that line. And so, I will say, didn't have sex till I was married, right?
Yeah.
And that does a couple of things to you. Number one, guess what you're going to do as soon as possible? Get married. Because there you are, in your teens, and you are in a body with hormones, and you're like, I really would like to have sex with somebody.
Yeah.
You know? And so, um,
How old were
you
you when
know,
you had sex for the first time?
21.
21? Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so a lot of people in that faith get married a little bit younger. And that's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
pretty primary reason, I would say. And although some people may have included some more gray areas in the way that they grew up as a witness, again, I was trying to nail that facade and be that person. And so I knew what was required of me, and I, held that line. I will say, like, at this point in my life, uh, I don't value that as an intelligent or important thing that I did to wait that long. I wouldn't promote that. In fact, I would say like, well, you can't understand, the difference or similarity between the sexual drive of yourself and your partner. You don't really know if you're aligned in those ways, and that probably there are tons of things that would benefit somebody that, had exploration in that, in
to
that
be able to
sense.
get to
But
know their
yeah,
partner.
but for me, didn't happen. Had sex when I was married first. And in that particular faith, I started doing, because I am in the construction industry up to today. In fact, my primary job right now, outside of some of these things, is in the general contracting world.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was doing volunteer construction, and I had been married for a number of years. And the person that I was married to had like a really severe body dysmorphia, and she was very negative on herself, which kind of like, of course, cut into our intimacy.
Absolutely.
And on top of that, one of the ways that she would cope was to tell me like really negative messages about myself.
About you.
Yeah, so she would, and at the time I was a thinner person, and she would, tell me that I was like this tiny husband with this giant wife, or she would even go as far as telling me that I was like disgusting to her. I remember she would like, this one time she cornered me in the closet, and it sounds really funny to say like cornered, but like, she's standing in the doorway and I'm in there, and she's just telling me how disgusting I am to her, just going on and on. She's like, you're like one of these Calvin Klein models, not the men, the women, just like going on and on. And me just kind of like losing it at one point and just being like, shut up. And like yelling at someone or being mean is not really how I intend to handle anything.
I don't ever see
But
you
outside of
intending to
that,
do
like it
that.
really
Yeah.
wasn't a person that I could talk to and say, this is hurtful. This isn't, like
Right.
those conversations didn't happen. Uh, on top of that, I'm sure I didn't have great boundaries at the time. I'm sure that I was less assertive, like all of those things that you maybe learn as
You
you
haven't learned
relationship over and
those
over, right? But hey,
capabilities
there I
yet.
was,
Yeah.
my first rodeo, being like, God, this is really hard. But yes, so I, will just disclose because it's an honesty. Um, I got to the point where I didn't really have any self-esteem,
Yeah.
and I believed everything that she said. Uh, when somebody talks to you like that, you don't really want to have sex either. And so, like, our relationship probably was going, several months, if not a year, in between times that we even were having sex.
So the whole reason why you made the decision to get married, based on what you knew and what you felt inside on your hormones, like you wanted to have sex, and then you get with somebody that you marry somebody that you don't really know, and then you get in a relationship, and now you're stuck with somebody that, well, not stuck, but you make the decision to
There you
be
are,
with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I would say, of course, not the only reason. I had other expectations for marriage,
Yeah.
like that we would love each other and treat each other good or support each other, um, and none of those things were happening. And um, in that particular religion, unless somebody has sex outside of marriage, like you don't get a divorce either. In fact, if you were just to divorce someone, they would also kick you out. And so I really kind of felt trapped in a lot of ways. There's probably more that I could have done to reach out for help or whatever it was. But that is where I found myself, and I ended up cheating with literally the first person that showed me like an iota of attention.
Yeah.
I met somebody, they were very complimentary of me. And, somehow with, the zero game that I had been born with, I was able to convert that into an experience, shortly thereafter. And after that happened, I actually went, back home and just turned myself in. This is what I have done. Um, and I had to kind of like announce that I had done that or disclose that I had done that to
The community.
the community at the time, and I got kicked out. At the time I was doing that volunteer construction, I was actually in Zambia, and so they had to like fly me home and everything like
Wow.
that. And I'm gonna share another, part, and I feel a little bit like uncomfortable, but I'm just gonna put it out there because maybe that's my style a little bit. So, in the place where I was living in Africa, it's like 1 in 6 people have AIDS.
Wow.
And so I had this experience, and I even actually had a condom.
Mhm.
And the person that I was with was like, what are you doing? Like, I'm not dirty, like really, for whatever reason, took me having a condom as saying, you must have AIDS,
Right.
and was really offended. And me being a newbie in the universe, I was like, gosh, I guess there are no other factors here. I guess I should put this away. And
Yeah.
so I had unprotected sex, and I'll also say it probably lasted like 30 seconds, So
As
it's
did my
such
first
a,
time.
you know,
Even though it wasn't your first time, but
right. But I
yeah.
might as well have been, to be honest with you. Right. So, anyways, um, so of course, when I turned myself in, one of their first questions was, hey, did you use protection? And,
Yeah.
I was like, I knew what that meant, and I said no. And I could just see the look on their faces change from like, you're an idiot to like, and you're dead.
You're dead to me. Yeah.
You have AIDS and you're gone. And so they, told me that was likely the case. Get tested, flew me home, and when the period in between flying home, finding a place to live, because now I am also like I'm outside of my community, and so I can't go back to my parents, to my friends. I've been volunteering for years, and I don't have a place that I live, and I just really had to like figure out how to, rent a room and be somewhere. And all during that time, I'm also thinking, and I have AIDS, and I'm probably going to die.
Wow. That's
And
so
this
much.
is a while ago, right? Of course, things have changed and what that looks like now. And but also, I was pretty uneducated at that time.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I got the testing, and I remember driving and getting the text message that said that the blood test results were negative. And I pulled over into the shoulder, and it was like I had just been born. So, in my mind, I was like, religious. I went out into the world, and guess what? It's just like they said, everything's bad. I'm dying. The end. That was the story of me,
Yeah.
on Earth. And then I get this text message, and I actually, it's not the end.
You're
And
actually just
so,
starting.
yeah, I'm actually just starting. Now I'm outside of the religion that I didn't want to be in. I'm not in this marriage because we got a divorce, and hey, again, if somebody cheats, you can get a divorce, and so that happened. And um so all of the things that I didn't like are gone, and I'm not going anywhere. And so what am I going to do? What do I want my life to be about? Like, where is it all going from here?
What did you do?
Yeah, so I I would say that in my own estimation, I had I was about as slutty a person as you could imagine, for a good amount of time. Like I that was an interest to me,
Yeah.
as it is to many people.
Yeah.
Um, but like more than that, I really wanted to like know that part of myself.
Hmm.
And also, I will say it took me a good amount of years, because that, again, that witness religion is really invasive.
Yeah.
And so it took me a good amount of years to actually believe that I wasn't a bad person,
Yep.
and that who I was as a person was based on how I treated people. Um, and then what did that mean for me, and how did I treat people, and like what would it take for me to be able to look at myself and say, this is a good person and I like this,
Yeah.
right? And it has taken me at least, I'm 46 right now.
Hmm.
It took me at least till I was 35 to ever like say the words out loud, like I love myself,
Yeah.
right? Which I think is probably a statement still lacking in a lot of people's lives if they were to think
It's a
about
very
it.
powerful statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but on the road there, because now the world wasn't bad, and like I knew that I believed that the, people in the world weren't just bad by default. It made me start thinking a lot more about like what is a good person, before I turn that mirror, the most inside. Like, how about on the outside?
Yeah.
Who are my friends now? What kind of people am I going to accept into my life?
Yeah. Because now you have a clean slate.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think today, excuse me,
Mhm.
one of the things that is really important to me today is like I feel that human beings are very lovable.
Yeah.
And I think that we're very similar. I think that life is really hard, and that there is a lot of like turmoil and sadness and other things that even when it's going great, it's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, yeah, you know what I
I'm proud
mean?
of
Life's
myself. I
tough,
love
right? It's
myself.
like this, and that's the fact of it. And if I could look back at my, upbringing and say, it was hard to feel loved, or the people that I trusted to love me didn't, or my community or parents, even where maybe I expected unconditional love, they were just like, actually, fuck off.
And
You know what I
I
mean?
kind
And
of wanted to dive into that as far as your parents go. Like, where were your parents through all this?
yeah, I mean, they really cut the cord with me right away. And
Yeah,
even up to today, if I were to reach out to them in some way, shape, or form, I used to, and I'll maybe talk more about that, but I used to send them updates on my life because I didn't want to just become fully disconnected from them.
yeah,
And maybe I would get like an emoji back or something, or nothing.
yeah.
And even though I was trying to, like, I'm going to say, like, I was trying to put myself in their shoes and consider the fact that they believed that they were doing their version of the best for me. And one of the tenets of that religion is like, you cast people out because then they'll want to come back.
Yeah.
They don't have you, and if they really want that, they'll come back. Um, I think in reality, that's a good way for a religion to protect itself,
Mhm.
and no one from the outside who's like, it's fucking great out here, is around.
Yeah.
And so what do they have except the messages from the inside being like, don't go out there. um but if I were to put myself in their shoes, and they believe that God said, this is what you should do, this is how you should treat that person, that is what it would mean to be loving, that's the best way you can tough love this. Well, I guess if I believed that that's what God wanted, maybe I would do it too. I don't believe that way, right?
Yeah.
But if I put myself in their shoes and that was the best and that's what they're doing, how upset can I feel about it?
Yeah.
I don't condone that behavior, and I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't treat anybody like that. Um, but it takes away the personal nature of feeling hurt, and it makes it more like that is just the story of them as them. And is it really about me, or is it about them and their beliefs? And it took me a while to get there. And before that, I did have a lot of abandonment feeling from them, or
I can imagine.
like, I could I say I ever experienced unconditional love where somebody was just like, I'm gonna love you no matter what.
Yeah.
you know I can't say that I have. And but at the same time, like, what am I going to do about that anyway, right? So I could spend my time feeling sad,
And focusing on
feeling
that.
hurt, or being upset, or being like, they blah blah blah, or I could uh acknowledge that that's their best, good for them. uh I don't want to do that, and in fact, I could use what happened as an example for how I'm going to love people.
Yeah.
Or like, every person that we come in contact with, there's probably some good, there's probably some bad.
Yep.
And why not take notes on all of it instead of just throw stones?
Yeah.
And
At
that
the
is
first
kind of
thing
how
that
yeah, that's
that it
kind of how
breaks.
I feel about them. um I could say that I'm like really close in my life to just being like, they just exist, and that's it. I, of course, consider, like, could there ever be more? But, like, I know that the answer is no. And so
Right.
instead of worrying about that or wasting time on it, I would rather think about who I would like to be, or because of the things I've experienced in my life, what will it take for me to act in a way where I'm getting really great love from the people around me, and I'm being an example of what I think love is
Yeah.
to the people that I love, that are in my community and that are around me.
So those emojis or those text messages that you would send them were those kind of like worms to see if they would bite, to see if there was any
Man, I
if
gotta.
there was any chance of reconciliation or even having a what we would deem a family
Well,
or
yeah, I can totally describe the answer to that for you perfectly. There is no chance for reconciliation because they will be Jehovah's Witnesses and I will not.
right.
And so I know that. My the subject of my hurt is whether or not they actually care,
Yeah.
right? I think that is what I always wanted to like get to the bottom of. So, when I was little, you remember those little like rubber finger puppets? They're
Yeah.
like a little dragon or a bird, and the
Yeah.
arms are in there, like, "Ah,"
Yeah. I
right?
used to have them. Yeah.
Yes. So when I was little, I would take one of those and I would hide it in different places around the house where I knew that my mom would find it. Medicine cabinet, the cabinet where the cups were, something like that. And
Hmm.
when she would find it, um, she would pretend to be scared. And so I would know that she found it because I would just hear from somewhere else in the house, like pretend screaming fear.
Yeah.
And that was like a game that we would play. Well, um, like a year and a half ago, I was at Changing Hands bookstore,
Mhm.
and next to the register are all of these little finger puppets. And so I sent my mom a video, and it was just like my knee, and then like slowly this finger puppet comes into it and is like, you know, and that was it. And
Yeah.
I just sent it to her. And then she responded with the like double crying emoji. And I was just like,
Still got
got
you.
you, motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like we are tied together. We do have history.
Yeah.
I am a human being over here without you, and you are over there without me, and that is the fact of us. And so I didn't do it to do anything except to be like, there is a line here, that connects us, and
Yeah.
that's just a fact. And is that sad or happy that that exchange happened? I guess a little bit of both, but it just kind of went to like prove that point to me that, hey, these are two human beings, her and me, that are lovable and that have feelings. And even if we do not know how to reconcile those to each other or our values or anything like that, we're still two human beings
Right.
that are doing their best,
Yeah. That's beautiful. I mean, the tie between that and hearing where you came from and where you are now with your family, like it's a lot to process, it's a lot of grief to go through, and like I could only imagine having to go through not having growing up with parents after the what your teens or your 20s, your early 20s. um I was lucky enough to have my parents there, to be able to hey, I fucked up here. What do I do? And then be able to do it. They always let me learn the hard way. But I also never asked, I went and did it the hard way, but they'd always be there to support, you know what I mean? So that's a lot to go through, but you're an amazing, resilient, beautiful person, that arise from those ashes. So
Well, thank you. And I will say, yeah, I feel really resilient. Like I don't look at that and have like a big woe is me. And even
yeah,
when I talk about it, I don't feel like I'm talking about my trauma.
yeah,
It's just like I used to live in Texas
yeah,
from, year this to year that. And it's just the fact of where I've been,
yep,
but it has delivered me at feeling like, you know what, I could start over anytime. Or you could drop me out of a plane with my wallet and a phone and I'd figure it out. And I feel really glad that I have had those experiences where at some point I was like, man, ain't nobody but me going to take care of this mess.
yeah.
And that is really liberating in a lot of ways to have that experience where you're kind of like broken down to zero and it's just you. And then what? And I'm happy that I have had those experiences in my life for sure.
So speaking on the experiences and that I don't want to say trauma, I want to say your perspective on when you got married, and the the sexual aspect of it, and then cheating on a partner, getting exiled. um did that all play a part in, you've worked at a sex, or a center for sex therapy.
Mhm.
Did that did that have any vision on shaping that part of you? Did that mold any part of you into wanting to be part of a center like that?
Yeah, I will say that, I am up to now, I like to use the term hopeful romantic, even if I have gone through like bouts of like, man, romance is not working out for me. I have a really firm belief in love, kind of going back to that that's how I want to feel about people.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up and kind of in my early teens, and I started to like, oh, I have a crush on this girl, I this or I that, I was like a little bit obsessed with the concept of being a good sexual partner in the future because like that was part of a relationship. And then of course I was very curious about the world of sexuality.
Yeah.
And so before I was having sex, I used to, because I also, if I looked at porn, which, not only, of course, did it happen, but at the time, young enough to have it taken, 30 minutes to download a picture. But, later on, you could go on the website and you could learn things about porn. Like there were, not about porn, you could learn things about sex, like what positions or practices. And, there were different websites that claimed to, how do you do this a little
Yeah.
bit more than just pornography. And if I was to look at pornography, I would feel really shameful. Um, you're not supposed to do that. Certainly not supposed to
That was a
masturbate as a
question I was
witness.
gonna
Like
have
all
for
of that
you.
is super
Yeah.
bad, super
Yeah.
shameful. Shouldn't do it, right? And so I was like, how do I be a horny little MF and also not be like drowning in shame at the end of the day?
Yeah.
And so my workaround was that I felt okay if I went on these websites that were like educational.
Ah.
And so I did become really interested in, the how to. And so it would be like, oh, fingering, like how do you move your fingers, where, how far, how deep. And there were just lots of different things at that time that I became interested in. Of course, I wasn't practicing any of them, so they weren't doing me a ton of good,
Yeah.
but the world of knowledge was out there. Or I'll go to like maybe one of the main things. So I work as a sex coach, right?
Yeah.
And a coach in conjunction with a therapist's office oftentimes is doing, because you're not doing therapy, right? The therapist does that,
Right.
and that might be a little bit of the more like
In
psychological,
depth.
emotional.
Yeah.
And so in my application of coach, there's a lot of education about how the body works,
Hmm.
what some of the body's like, if the body's automatic systems do this, like what does it take for a guy to, have an orgasm? What are the processes that happen in the body that cue all of those things? And then um, what are the processes that you can interact with so that your body is like, oh, is this happening? Is it not happening? Is this slowing
Be
down?
comfortable with your body and how it feels in a moment.
Yeah, or even to like at a really an easy level, like in the direction of ejaculation control, right?
Hmm.
So some of the things that happen is like heavy breathing, muscles clenching. There's a particular like tightness, and pleasure is growing in the meantime. Well, if you were to, just as an example, regulate your breathing, then that system of like up heavy breathing, muscles clenching, sensation grows, it's time for an orgasm. Slowing down the breathing tells the body that this first part isn't happening yet. And so like regulated breathing, just as a broad brushstroke,
Yeah.
is a really easy way to control, do I feel like this is about to happen, or can I push it off in some way, shape, or form,
And
right?
that dabbles into like the tantric kind of thing where
But
you
yeah, a
start.
bit.
Yeah.
And so I remember seeing, when I was a teenager, this diagram that was describing not only breathing, but it was also kind of going back to the tantric direction. It was talking about like moving the sensation of pleasure around your body so that it wasn't just right here,
Yeah.
right? But also breathing so that it's like there's like a softening of the intensity of everything and a heightening of pleasure in general
Yeah.
instead of localized. And that was so cool. Well, um, presently as a coach, I teach on like a bunch of different things, and that ejaculation control is one of them because it's pretty solid male topic for guys to be able to feel like they have mastery of. Actually found that slide. I went looking on the internet for it for a long time, and I found that image, and I have like a slide presentation on that topic that goes through different things. And I was like so proud to find that image and like put it in there with the rest of the things. Cause I remember it was a great image about the breathing and the body and stuff. And it like bridged the gap for me of all of that time where I was like, I want to like, I need to be sexualized somehow. I'm human. And my future, and being like, it wasn't all like it was worth it to be where I was.
Yeah.
I spent my time on different things, and it delivered person. Um, and I'm happy that I was there. And I would say, if I can, I feel like a successful lover, right? Presently. And maybe it's because I got out of the gate really slow and I was hitting the books early or whatever. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's because I like to pay attention to people.
Yeah.
But I'm happy for where I was. And it was really cool to take the intensity of that time and turn it into something. I'll add to that though, like I have always felt like a very sexualized person, including when I wasn't having it,
Mhm.
including up to now, right? And when I was married a second time, because I got married really briefly after I was a witness, um,
How old were you?
I was 34.
Okay,
Yeah.
so divorced for the first time 21 or 22?
So I was a witness until I was 28. So I got
Okay.
married at 21, and I was actually married to that person
Oh,
for
wow.
about 7 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's a
So
lot of.
those conditions were
Yeah.
not great for a while. And I think
Yeah.
that's why it really got into my brain, those negative messages. Like I was there for a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense now.
Um, but yeah, so, I was married, but I still felt like a really sexualized person. And I wanted to consider like, how do I bring, I, it was a monogamous relationship. Let me state that, right?
Mhm.
How do I bring more sexuality into my life in a way that isn't upsetting the balance of, this monogamous relationship? Um, and what I ended up doing was finding a place called the Sexology Institute. They, used to be there in San Antonio. They've got some other offices around the U.S. But it's a therapist office, and they had a syllabus for sex coaching. And so I went through this really amazing syllabus, and it just allowed me to kind of like understand sexuality, mine, theirs, like, a little bit more about that topic. Cause having had the late start, I just felt so like I had more room to grow
Yeah.
as a person, to understand myself, to consider the topics. And so I took this training, which was really in depth. And after that, I used to teach like group workshops at this Sexology Institute,
Mhm.
and so that was really cool. And so kind of combined like, yeah, I had been really interested in these things as I was growing up, but then as I was an adult, I was like, well, I'm still really interested. I
Mhm.
love I love this world, and so kind of getting involved in that coaching allowed me to still have conversations with, people, strangers, clients that maybe I saw with more regularity, and really be like talking about the really vulnerable spaces with
Mhm.
human beings, maybe things that nobody else hears or knows. And I loved it. It was really interesting to me to be in those spaces with people.
So circling back to when you started talking about working with the organization, and teaching people how to, or men how to, orgasm. Now, are you talking about ejaculating or orgasming?
Yeah, so really, I'm talking about ejaculation. So it's ejaculation control because you perhaps could have multiple orgasms,
Yeah.
right, from a sensation standpoint. But
Yeah.
for many men, not all of them, like once you ejaculate and that muscular spasm happens, it like pushes semen out, that spasming, then, everything's like, oh God, that was, and now you're on a break, right?
Right.
And so it was really the concept of how to, interrupt the process of ejaculation or to push it out farther.
Yeah.
Or rather to place it under your control instead of having it just happen as a like, well, I don't know when this is going to happen and we'll both be surprised when it does, but
Yeah.
instead be like, it's not
Controlling it.
happening. Now I'm open to it.
Right. Do you tend to, so I know I tend to focus on my partner before anything, but also I'm also able to do it while in conjunction, until they're satisfied. And then because once I've ejaculated, then the you can always reload a little bit, but it's not going to be that same thing. But as far as a woman goes, like you can make them orgasm multiple times and savor that moment until you release. Do you?
Yeah, I feel that I similarly, hey, I like to be a generous partner also. And
Mhm.
so, sometimes maybe I won't even have an ejaculation and maybe I'm more focused on my partners. And that's fine with me because I really do like to, I will say that like I feel very voyeuristic in nature
Mhm.
where I really like to see the experience that that person is having. I'm not so worried about what's happening to me.
Yeah,
I really like to be present with what is happening with the person in front of me, if that makes sense.
it absolutely does. Pleasing your partner is one of those, when you're really connected with somebody that you love and that you enjoy spending like a lot of time with, like that's something that you get to share together. Um, and I know I hold that dear to my heart, with all my previous and past partners and current partners, that sharing that moment is something beautiful. And getting to see them express that love and receiving, is just that alone, without anything else, is just a beautiful thing in a
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, definitely. I would even say, I'm gonna put an interesting curveball on that concept. So, um, when I got out of, witnessness, and I used to get positive feedback about who I was from witnesses looking at my facade and being like, good boy, don't rock you haven't rocked the boat and you don't stand out at all. This is excellent, right?
Right. You're
Um,
painting the perfect
yeah.
picture.
And so out in the world, learning to, because it did take me some time to get to, being good at my craft, right? Sexually. Um, but I got really great, like in this, one of the things that I love about the sexual space is that it is very intimate.
Hmm.
It is sometimes even a little bit primal, right? And so you might have a one night stand with someone that you don't know very well, and yet you would be in the most intimate part of their psyche for a second. And not everybody wants to connect like that, you know what I mean? But oftentimes, like, hey, you can't help but be vulnerable in that space. You are exposed,
Yeah.
right? And I loved to be again in that space with people, but also it provided, like, if I was a competent lover, the way that I could tell that they like intimately or emotionally responded to me was like, this is really important what's happening right now. And so I really loved that feedback from that space. But then I will also say that I also think that I have really come to appreciate, or put like, what is the feedback about me in the sexual world? Like, I've ranked it really high in my experience, or even I would say I've ranked it high in how I decide how I feel about myself, right? And depending on your relationship template, that may not be the best way to decide how you should feel about yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I would even say, like, I'm 46, working out, doing all the things that I can do to maintain my youth, right?
Hmm.
But at some point, and I can watch it happen even now in the mirror, like, hey buddy, you're just not going to be as cute as you once were. You'll have to work out 10 times as hard to get the result that you used to get, just like thinking about working out.
Yeah.
And energetically or sexually, like maybe you won't just be the cat's pajamas forever, right? And
Yeah.
so I don't want to depend on that as such a huge like validation source for myself.
Yeah.
And I can tell that I still do. I still rank it really high. I feel like sex still occupies a large part of my brain. And I think that it is because I do relate I relate my validity to it in some ways, right? And just being honest, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, like
Yeah.
I notice that about myself sometimes. And so, especially like if you're in a monogamous space, like that can't be how you want to relate to everybody, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or I will say that a practice that I am working on presently is, so is it sex, right? Or is it intimacy? Or is it vulnerability? Like, if I were to even break sex down into the little pieces, what is the thing that I really want to get out of that? Hey, if I don't have to have an orgasm for myself,
Out of
is
that
it that?
experience,
What was that?
out of that experience.
No, just like if what am I getting out of sex,
Yeah.
right? If I was to break it down into all the ingredients of what makes it so savory, right? Is one of the ingredients actually the one? And so I've thought a lot about like, well, it's not per se the physical component because I don't always care how my physical side goes. So is it the intimacy? Is it how the emotional exchange? And so as I have thought more about like the emotional exchange, right? Well, that has allowed me to consider more, what am I open to with my friends? How do I want to treat my friends? Do I want my friends to feel from me uh, sexy, vulnerable, and have emotional exchange? And if I was doing that, would I be like, this is where I'm trying to spend all of my time, right?
Yeah.
And work in progress, but it has just like made me think about having a multifaceted approach to when you're like, I think this is me. Well, what are the facets of that? What are the ingredients? And can you get into them further and be like, oh, actually, this is me, or this is really important, and this. And so it just, as I grow, as I'm in different spaces, I have been a polyamorous person for a number of years and am presently a monogamous person, right? And that is because those are the choices that I have made, or, where or how I want to experience love. But it doesn't mean that the things that have been important to me go away.
Yeah.
I have been figuring out, how do I bring those important things into every phase or season of my life and honor them in a way that feels really satisfying or satiating, you know?
Yeah. Touching on the polyamory, when did you experience in that, and how did that come apart in life? What made you want to be open to something like that? Something that in our society is deemed like taboo.
Mhm.
What Even though I think it's fucking bullshit. But like how did you get into that? How did that page of your book get written?
Yeah. And I want to disclaimer, I'm going to stick a quick disclaimer out there. I don't think that any relationship template is the one,
Yeah,
right? And so I think there's a lot of people that will be like, well, if it's not this, it's this,
yeah,
or this is old news, this is new, this is, current. If you were really open minded, whatever, right?
yeah,
I think that there are a lot of ways to have a beautiful relationship that is meaningful. But on that topic, I had a short stint of a couple like really important to me relationships. And when I say important to me, I mean that the person showed up with a lot of emotion and love. And I love that. Uh, I feel like I'm in a really, valid relationship, and in fact, will sometimes maybe put up with things that are not great behaviors if I feel like I'm getting that thing that I want, the really intense love and emotion. And in a couple of relationships, I used to be met with a lot of like poorly placed jealousy.
Yeah.
And I think it really was just due to the insecurity of the person in the moment. And I had this one relationship with somebody that I loved very much, but
So their
they used to,
insecurities on you thinking that
yeah,
you were
they
cheating on
used
them?
to believe that I was cheating,
Yeah.
and I was not. And they would, like, if they texted me at work and I couldn't get back right away or whatever,
Yeah.
I would come home and they would be like drunk already in the backyard and be like, "I think you're cheating on me."
Yep.
And so I was like, got on Marco Polo, hey, getting to work, hey, leaving work, hey, heading to lunch, like any bit of communication that I could think of to
Yeah.
be, and not even feeling bad about it.
Yeah.
Whatever I could do to be like, hey, I'm on the level, don't you worry about it.
Being
That I was
transparent.
trying to do
Yeah.
that. And then I would come home and she would be like, it's even more shady that it's like you're trying to hide something with all of these messages. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't even know what to do or how to make you feel better. And I remember I was just being nice and smiling, and she was like, "You're flirting with this waitress. You're trying to." I don't know what that I was trying to do right in front of her at a table, being nice, but
Yeah.
um, and I was like, kind of wanted to broach the insecurity topic,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Where is this really coming from?" And she was like, "Don't you understand? I can't talk about this." And she was like, in that relationship, would just put up of just a
A gate.
brick wall,
Yeah.
like, we're not going to get to the bottom of why this keeps happening to us. And
But even though it's a core thing that you keep on struggling with.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is a core thing. And, I feel presently like, hey, that's a person's insecurity. It perhaps wasn't me, but maybe something about the way that I acted, or, the value that she put in the relationship made her not feel great. That could be as well. But then also, I think that for her to love me so intensely, she had to be like, have a big low, and then we could have a big high and be like, ah, you know what I mean? And then we had to have another big low. And I think that is that was the way that she generated the intense high.
Yeah.
And so after a while of experiencing that over and over, like almost like on a cycle,
Very
we broke up.
bipolar
Yeah.
tendencies.
Hmm.
Really high highs, really low lows.
Yeah. And I got into another relationship, and I have, friends who are, men and women. And I had this friend that was, part of the coaching business that I was in the past, that was going through cancer.
Hmm.
And she called me on the phone, and she was like, having to get a mastectomy, and she was kind of crying about it. And this person that I was dating, she like came into the room, and I put my phone call on mute because, like, hey, I want to respect this person's privacy. You're a stranger. You're not yet invited to their sadness right now. You don't know this person, and
Hmm.
so I'm not gonna. I felt like a weird betrayal to just be like, why don't you just listen to this person's lowest point? You don't.
Yeah.
So from the time that I did that, she was like, "You're cheating on me," and I was like, "This person lives in Florida, and they're married."
Oh wow.
Like, and she just couldn't get that thought out of her brain, right? And so that was like a second relationship
Did
where
he
I'm
know
like,
that she was in a relationship with you? Did her partner, or that she was married to?
well, she wasn't in a relationship with me. She was just, we were friends. Yeah, he
Nice.
knew that we were friends. Yeah, in fact, in the previous relationship, when I was having these ups and downs with this other gal, I
Yeah.
would FaceTime both of them, and we would like talk relationship stuff, so like he knew that we were friends.
Beautiful.
Anyways, yeah, so she just kind of like got that into her head, and it would come up. And um it just really got old. And if somebody believes that about you, what do they think about you? And what kind of person do they think you are? Not that that is the worst kind of person, but like, hey, can you trust the person that you're with or not? Like, what's it going to take? And so, when we broke up, and I had heard a lot more about polyamory, and so in my mind, I was like, maybe that is a relationship template where nobody is going to get jealous
Yeah.
and be like, "Are you sleeping with somebody else?"
Mm.
Because the answer will be yes,
Mm.
and it's known. And that's kind of what I thought, right? And
Yeah.
oh, jealousy won't exist there. Well, haha. Um, yeah, and so
Joke's on
I
you.
kind of got into that. I kind of got into that template, and realized, well, it's not so easy. Of
No.
course, nothing is, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I will say that I relationshiped with some really amazing people, and that all of the people who I really spent time with were had some really great facets of what I think is beautiful about humans or about femininity or just them as them, had a beautiful magic.
Yeah.
And I really loved that. And I loved the ability to be able to be like, this is beautiful. And so is this, and I thought that that was really wonderful. But I also will say that during that time, I can't say that I really met somebody that to me was like checked all of the boxes of who I would want to say, like, this is my person. And I think that as a human being, for me, right, not for anybody else, I still wanted that at some level. Like, I definitely attempted to have like a primary partner
Yeah.
or someone like, where do you spend most of your time? And if you spend most of your time somewhere, is time hierarchy? Are you saying that there's something I like more about you, and so I want to spend more time here?
Yeah.
And so in that concept, like, will you always like someone more or whatever? And so it made more sense to me to consider hierarchy.
Yeah.
Um, but also I can't say that I met the person where I was like, from an emotional intelligence level, communication level, or we matched, sexually, like check, check, check. I wasn't experiencing that.
Yeah.
Right. And I was there again for a couple of years, having a great time,
Yeah.
and learning about myself, learning about how to treat other people, more instances of showing up on the first date and being like, these are my agreements with myself and the world and my partners,
Yeah.
and really creating a lot of like transparency and openness that I would now take to any part in my life. And like at that time, I thought it was indicative of that relationship style or template, but why not any date be like, these are my agreements with myself, this is
Yeah.
how I want to show up sexually, like, why not? And I
Yeah.
never was doing that before. Well, when I met the person that I'm married to now, um, kind of on our first date, she was like, not picking at the fact that I was poly, but she was just having me explain how I got there, you know what I mean, and what my experiences were and what I was looking for. And, she really was looking for those things, and, kind of um, communicated pretty clearly that she felt that she could check those boxes. And um, I was like, well, let's find out,
Yeah.
and really kind of going back to the like hopeful romantic. Well, I do want to have like a maxed out, hyper in love, hyper sexual experience with another human being.
Yeah.
You think you can do that trick? And we're married. It's
Yeah.
been 2 years. And so I really feel excited about finding a person that wanted to be like, all in. I think as I talk to some of my friends that are poly and or open, and we have, I would say, a lot of friends in that, environment. Some of them will kind of be like, well, is there are you settling in marriage? Do you let things get boring? Is it going to be the sameness? Is it contrary to your nature? Again, all of those things are true in the world of monogamy, and they're true in the world of polyamory, just depending on how you do it, right?
Yep.
And so for myself in this relationship, I think about how do I, just like I would meeting a stranger and looking at them and being like, I want to fall in love with this person, do I do that to my wife when I go home?
Yeah.
Do I look at her like microfacial expressions and fall in love with them brand new? Because you can do that, and it's a practice or a habit. But if that's how I want to feel every day,
Yeah.
I need to make that.
Priorities.
It's NRE is really easy, right?
NRE.
Like new relationship energy, right?
Hmm.
That's easy. It's served to you more, but uh, what made a new relationship feel special is that you're like newly appreciating all of these things, or you're surprised by them, or you're like, oh, look at that. And later when you don't feel them, it's because you're not surprised or you're not looking.
Yeah.
And so look harder, surprise yourself again today, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like you can feel those feelings, and that's really special to me. And so I would say, like, at the time when I was poly, I didn't go into those relationships either with like my guard up, or like you'll get the vulnerable side of me maybe down the road. From day one, I tried to show up with all of my emotion and transparency,
Yeah.
and in person or intimately, like, this is like the whole story of me.
Yeah.
If you were gonna fall in love with something, like, here it all is.
Yep.
And one of the things that I have kind of come to realize, like when I was a witness, I couldn't love myself because the version of what I was putting on the outside, I didn't feel was lovable,
Yeah.
right? And if somebody else cared about me, like if all of those people were saying good job, it didn't mean very much because they weren't saying it to me, they were
Yeah.
saying it to my facade.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to love myself in the future, I had to accept who I was. And similarly, if you want another person to love you, you got to show them you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people in new relationships like to be like, oh, the jury is out,
Yeah.
there's a screen door. And for me, I'm like, man, either this is gonna like burn up, go up in flames right now, or
Yeah.
or it's gonna happen. Like, I want to be exactly who I am in full force out front.
I know that person's gonna
And
love
that is,
you.
yeah, like if
Yeah.
they cared about me, if they loved that or liked that, whatever, it's
Yeah.
because I was me.
Yep.
And they had the opportunity to love me, right?
Yep.
Not to be like, well, I also don't know how I feel about your screen door.
Yeah. Yeah, all too many times in relationships I've noticed that, when that happens, when they only give you certain parts of themselves, and then, so you move in together, and then little by little those different parts start coming out, and you're now getting a different person, and that perspective is getting grayer and grayer and grayer. And now it's to the point where you don't know that person that you originally started being with, even though you came up 100%, and you were fully transparent and everything like that. But the other person, that happened to me one time. I was, started seeing a woman in Arizona while I lived in Washington. um and we got down to, let's move in together. And as soon as we moved in together, I proposed to her, and then little by little things started, notching off, and I started figuring out different things, and then it kind of fizzled. You love the person, but you also want to love the person that you originally met and that originally like came there for and showed up for, and for who they showed you who they were. um but that was just a thing for me.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that, having a similar experience, or maybe even feeling that way about myself at
Yeah.
times, really made me want to change the way that I came into a relationship, what I was wanted to be vulnerable enough to offer out front. And like, I know a lot of people will say they're afraid to get hurt, and so they have to hold something back.
Yeah.
And a practice for me has been to figure out, hey, if I love myself,
Yeah.
right? If I really am positive that this is great,
Yeah.
right? And not to be like egotistical, but like, damn, I want to love people. I work hard, right? If I'm confident in that, and it's somebody doesn't want it,
Yeah.
and they leave, or they reject me, or they cheat, right? They wanted something different, and that is them,
Yep.
and that is what they needed to feel okay, right? And is that really about me, or is that about them?
Yeah.
And, hey, that's their story. And if they have to go somewhere else, or if they need something else, that is about them. And I could take that personally, or I could be really invested in loving the product that I am or that I have, and looking for a person that's like, man, that is
That loves
that
you
is
for
what I
you.
am looking for.
Yeah.
And so I will say the times when I have broken up, and it's like Austin, at the beginning of Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, and he's like, his girlfriend was a fembot,
Uh-huh.
and then he's like, I'm single, and he's like walking around the hotel like naked, and I've kind of have felt like that. Like if I broke up, instead of being like so sad, I was like, I have an opportunity to go find the person again. Like that wasn't it.
Yeah.
How exciting that I'm liberated. Because you know what? The first time around, I was married for 7 years knowing that I
Yeah.
was with the wrong person. And so now to be like, a year and a half, 6 months, 3 months, like to be released, to go find the right path at 3 months is just like, thank you. And so
Yeah.
it really had changed my view of like that. I wouldn't want to, I'll say, I wouldn't want to break up in the relationship I'm in. I love it so much.
Yeah.
And so I would do as much as I could to preserve and maintain it.
Right.
However, if I was unable to do that, in my best intentions as me, then we apparently were two trajectories that had intersected, but we're ultimately going like that, and I have to accept that and start thinking about what's over there.
Yeah.
You know.
That's a beautiful perspective on relationships and how things can either start to coincide or uh not coincide. So one big thing that I'd like to touch on is comfortability and like friends being friends and uh, being comfortable with embracing how you love and celebrate a friendship or you could structure it as a relationship towards two people, but a friendship nonetheless. But being able to and being comfortable to embrace, somebody in a comfortable way in a public setting without ruffling feathers. I mean, like when you and I see each other, like we're truly we love each other as friends, and we're comfortable embracing each other and kissing. And that's something that I share with a lot of friends, because I truly care about them and I truly love them. And an embrace of a kiss on the lips is something that shouldn't be just in a relationship or the somebody that's a woman or that you're married to, but it can be shared amongst friends and people that you truly love.
Yeah, I like that topic, and that is, I guess one of the things that showed me initially that you were like, look, I'm here to be vulnerable and really appreciate somebody. And, I have never thought that there was an ulterior motive behind it. It was actual affection,
Yeah.
right? And when I think about, not my family, but familial affection, right?
Yeah.
Can your dad give you a big hug, kiss you on the cheeks, or did you have a peck on the lips with your parents
Yeah.
when you were little and they were growing up and they're like, "Oh, I love you." You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like that is how it was. And I think that when you think of familial affection, why not really love your friends in a way that makes them feel like they're just like loved to the core of them, and it's
Yep.
not about something. And that's why, kind of going back to the like, I didn't feel like you were, hey, kiss, 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 kiss,
Hey,
kiss,
how you
question mark. You
doing?
know what I mean? It's more of just like, you're signaling the vulnerability to really care about somebody. And
Yeah,
that's how I feel when that happens. Um, and I love that, right? And I actually feel that, that like being comfortable enough to give affection and vulnerability to your friends in general, right? Male and female, or otherwise, um, even that is hard to come by.
yeah,
But especially amongst men, men have a really hard time knowing how to appreciate each other.
yeah,
Knowing how to give each other a compliment. Maybe knowing how to look at other men and use them as a metric for themselves.
yeah,
So I would kind of go back to like, if I have my own vision of what masculinity is, right? I'm sure I got some of it from my dad. And, I will say that I think my dad was a more soft, heartfelt person. And I love that in masculinity, right? I
yeah.
think that is important.
I
And
agree.
so, um, but also similarly, like, when you look at say the statue of David, right? Can you tell why he's hot? Or is it a problem that it is a male statue and you should just not look at it? You know what I mean? And
Right.
so similarly though, if you ask a guy, do you think that that dude is attractive?
Mhm.
A lot of men will like deflect from that, or
Yeah,
like, I don't look at guys that way. I don't know,
yeah,
well, you should know actually. Like, if you yourself want to improve, then you should look around you at the things available in the world and think, that is perhaps a class up from what I am, and I would like to pursue that, look into that, work towards that. And the presence of other men in the world give us that opportunity to be
yeah,
like, what a great example of masculinity is happening over there. What can I do about that?
yeah,
And I think that that is very important. And so similarly though, if a guy is attractive, and I hope, I aspire to be attractive, and when I say attractive, that I want to attract as well, right?
yeah.
And so when I see somebody else doing it, and and it's successful for them, or I like the way they're doing their masculinity, what could I learn from that?
Absolutely.
Can
What
I and
conversation
I
can I
like,
have to
what? I saw a guy with a cool ass beard a while, like many years ago,
like you have?
and yeah, and now mine is different. In fact, I grew it out, but now I have a different version of what a good beard is. But
Yeah,
the long story short is, you have to really be able to admire the beauty of other men to improve yourself as a male.
absolutely.
Plain and simple, right? And whether that is the admire the beauty of their values, of their person, of their physicality, if you turn off your ability to like have receptors for that data, you're just probably missing out on the way that you improve it and grow yourself. And so,
Yeah, you're not being true
yeah,
to yourself.
in construction, it has the highest suicide rate amongst males, even higher than the military. And that is not to say that it's harder than the military. It's that there are less systems in place about suicide and less awareness of the fact that suicide happens often in construction versus the military, right? And that's terrible.
Yeah,
But I would say, on a construction site, guys are not close. They have a hard time being friends. Everything is like fist bump, no hugs. There's no closeness, vulnerability, or
yeah,
intimacy. And you know what? That's a rough way to live.
yeah,
And so I really attempt to love my friends more intensely.
yeah.
I love to compliment them, and not like bullshit compliments. I mean, like, pay some goddamn attention and really be like, I see your magic right now. I want to tell you about it. I want to
That's
tell you what it meant to me.
I really appreciate that about you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back on that of like being able to embrace another male. I was doing a walkthrough with one of our facilitators at a venue, and one of the security guards was walking us out, and I said, "Hey, do you hug?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I gave him a big hug, and held him for a couple of seconds. And he's like, you could tell the emotion on his face, and, he's like, "I've never been hugged by another male like that.
Wow.
Like, that felt amazing." He's like, "Thank you for sharing that with me." And, like, just that intimate moment of allowing somebody to feel and embraced by another male, like, was so beautiful, you know?
Yeah, and hey, and going right back to this conversation, I will say that I have modeled my hugs after you because of that, like to be hugged and be like, man, this is not what I get from the male world. And this person has treated me like they care about me. There's no agenda behind it but
Yeah,
care. And I was like, ain't that the way to do it, right? And but similarly, I if my friend has dressed well and I can tell that they put in effort, I'm going to say something. If they look really handsome, I would love to say that to them because probably nobody told them. You
yeah,
know what I mean? And I just feel like it is a bummer that there seem to be a lot of no-fly zones
yeah,
amongst men.
especially in the field that you're in,
Yeah,
yeah,
and so I would like to pick away at those, in small intervals because they're not doing us any favors. If
no,
anything, they're creating too much space, and when there's too much space, there you are alone and on an island, and that is depressing.
yep,
And I think that fundamentally, as human beings, we all want to feel loved and lovable, or at a minimum, feel seen.
yeah,
And so like are we treating our friends, our and I'm going to say our male friends,
mhm,
like they are really seen by us like deeply,
yeah,
or is it just about work? Let's talk about work. Let's collaborate on sports, or like
yeah,
what can we actually be like, why you're an amazing human being? What else is there in that bucket that men could be talking to each other about, and using that as a way to elevate their person, elevate their masculinity,
yeah,
elevate like, oh, if we can be soft, how much softer can you be to this soft feminine individual over there?
yeah.
Does it help you learn how to exist in the soft space, and you can take that home to your relationships? Like, it's all worth practicing, if you ask me.
Yeah. Honestly, when I ran my electrical business in Washington, something that was huge that I made sure to do was to hug and embrace everybody that was in our company, and treat them all equally, and whether they were female or male, even though it was in a electrical kind of construction kind of business, but to really be able to empower them to have emotions in what we're doing, and not be afraid to ask questions, and feel like they're wanted or loved in what they're doing, because that to me is very important in building any kind of business, is having a relationship with the people that you're working with,
Yeah.
and being able to share that experience and that feeling of wantedness and love, with the people that you're working aside and spending most of your life with, like you can't, if you're not able to like share those moments with the people that you're working with every day, like it should be a norm in my book.
Yeah, I resonate with that a lot, and that is a thing that I have thought about many times, is the amount of time that we spend at work often is the majority of our lives, probably more than we spend with our partner at home, with any other auxiliary community that we've elected for ourselves, for most people. And so, are we really making something meaningful out of that time that is past? Like, and I made such and such dollars today. Or, like, at the human being level, did you do something good for yourself and for the community that's around you?
Yeah, yeah. I'd gauge people to look out more in the relationships that they have with the people that they work with, and really connect with those people, because you only have so much time here, and the the amount of time that you can just work aside somebody, you can also just ask them, "Hey, how's your day going?" Or give them a simple hug. Um, that'll change their entire day, maybe their entire week, maybe even their entire perspective on how they can treat others. So,
Yeah, you know, you asked me to. I'm gonna shoot the shot early here. You asked me to bring something that was like an important item.
yeah,
And I had these little stickers made. I'll give one to you, but it says the subtle art of eye contact.
yeah,
And eye contact is actually really hard for some people because it has connection, vulnerability, and intimacy built into it in a lot of ways. And sometimes when you look at another person, well, there is a whole other being of experiences, and maybe like, what are you responsible for once you make eye contact with somebody? How
yeah,
much of their life are you responsible for if you're just like, hey, human being, and that when I go, like, if I go to, I like doing crafty stuff. Say I go to Joanne's Crafts.
you're
Yeah,
amazing at crafts, by the
yeah,
way.
I'm busy. And the person at the checkout like never looks at me in the face. I just kind of feel like I, I was never really a person standing in front of them.
Yeah,
They didn't really have any desire to interact with me at the human level other than the process. And that is oftentimes how you feel when somebody doesn't look at you,
yeah,
right? And so to me, even if it's scary, eye contact is really important. And what you communicate with your eyes is really important. But on top of that, using your eyes to really observe someone
hmm,
gives you so much to talk about if you really spend the time to look,
yeah,
right? Can you look at them long enough to know, like, gosh, are they tired? Are they happy? How do they feel right now? How do they feel about what I'm saying? Like, if you really look at somebody, there is so much there, and it's data that you could add to your experience, and definitely data you could add to, like, how do you relate to that other being over there that's not you,
yeah,
and so eye contact really important for me.
yeah.
I'll even say that I think about my facial expression, like I kind of have, like, resting bitch face just a little bit, and like, I'm not mean. I am really positive. I'm very nice.
You are.
But if I don't tell my face to smile, that's not what it's doing,
Yeah,
right? And so I think about regularly, I want to put a smile on because I want that to be the experience that people have with me.
yeah,
And so I would say, like, it doesn't always matter if something comes natural to you, or to say like, oh, well, that's not the natural me, like, but what do you want for yourself is more important
yeah,
than what comes natural to you. And so I want people to look at me and see somebody that's friendly or see somebody that cares. And so I have to, as a job, tell myself to smile. But that's what I want, because I want their eyeballs to look over here and they're like, oh, this is a positive person that maybe is helpful or kind.
hmm,
And that's who's around me. That's the environment that I'm in. I like this environment. I feel safe. If I open the door for like a little old lady, I want her to look at me and be like, "What a nice young man." You know what I mean?
yeah.
Instead of look up and be like, "Ooh."
In those moments when you find somebody that doesn't engage with you, doesn't show you eye contact, um, do you ever do anything to try to brighten their spirits, or open their eyes up a bit?
Yeah, I like to perhaps either like make a personal engagement of like, "Oh, those are really cool, earrings that you have on." We were, wow, what was it? Oh, we were at breakfast the other day, and the lady had little waffle earrings with butter, little like butter squares. They were cute,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she was just doing her job and she wasn't talking to us. And I was like, oh, those great earrings, for the setting. Like you really nailed it. And then she like looked me right in the eye and was smiling. And it's like, you know what? Now we're two human beings. You thought that you were fun and you wanted to project that. And you know what? Another human being was like, oh, aren't you so fun? And so like by taking the time to be like, I am looking and noticing, and I'm going to tell you about it. All of a sudden, she was like,
Yeah.
now we look at each other, and you know what I mean. And I think like the eye contact thing to me is acknowledgement of the fact that another very important and very lovable human being is right in front of you.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Yeah.
And I would go back to we don't all agree with each other, and we're all trying to get the same thing, right? Feel safe, feel seen, feel loved and lovable. Like we're all trying to get that, but we're all doing it different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes that makes disconnects and hurt feelings. This person hurt me, these behaviors I don't like, whatever. But you know what? There's another very valid human being standing in front of you, and I want people to feel that way about themselves when they're in front of me. And if I could look back at my own past and say I did not feel valid or lovable for a long time and I wanted to, well then that's what I'm going to do all the time now is project that and be a source for that for my friends, for new people that I meet in the community, for a frickin' stranger. Why
Absolutely.
not be like, aren't you lovable, because people need that.
And that's so important to like, especially when you're dealing with community and new people coming in, is like, do you want your first interaction with somebody that may be new to the community to be cold and or misguided, or do you want to love and embrace that person for the first interaction that you have with them? Because that first interaction to me is it burns into your requiem of thoughts of who that person is from the start. And it's that first experience that gets burned into you of who that person is, and that relationship where it goes from there. And that's that spark that creates a relationship like you and I have, where we can embrace each other as brothers and truly love and embrace each other.
Yeah, I love that. And a thing that I would add to that, and we kind of talked about like or let me start here. I have in the last couple of years come in conjunction with the like burner community,
Yeah,
and one of the things that I love the most about it is that there's a lot of weirdos in there, right? And what I mean by that is it's a it's a community where you are encouraged to be yourself. And
absolutely.
so you see a lot of self-expression projected, and oftentimes in a lot of the world, and especially like hey in the Jehovah's Witness world, less self-expression and more blending in is kind of like the reward model. And in that world it's more of like, who are you and why is it different? And that's not only very achievable because we're all strange and different,
Yeah,
but it's like encouraged and rewarded, for you to be you,
yeah,
just you. I love that.
yeah,
um and so I really love having like meeting, say you meet a stranger and you're just like, aren't you so fucking cool?
yeah,
And I think that that is really valid, whether you're going to see that person a lot in the future or not. um Kind of irrelevant. And what I mean by that is what I really love, and this is even like something that I talk with friends or like new acquaintances about. Say you meet somebody cool at a really great event or a party, and you're like, you recognize each other as really cool, and you have some great conversation, maybe some like vulnerability. When you see them again, is it still there? You
yeah,
know what I mean? um, I really do my best to remember what I've heard. And if I thought that person was awesome, the next time I see them, they're awesome.
Yeah.
They don't have to do it again, or they don't have to do new tricks for me. I really try to remember that and honor people in that way. Sometimes in like the, sometimes in the like party spacious environment, you're like, "Oh, did we just connect because it was a fun experiences, excitement is high." And then you see those people again and like maybe they're not that friendly to you, or you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that kind of like, does it invalidate the experience if it doesn't exist anymore? I've thought about that.
Does it fizzle out?
Yeah, did it fizzle out? Was it fake?
Yeah.
Was it just related to the excitement of the moment or whatever else?
Yeah.
um you know and so I really try to, if somebody has gotten close to me or has impressed me in some way, I really want to keep that alive the next time I see them and treat them like where we left off, and not have to be like, you owe me new tricks this time around and then I'll like you, like,
Yeah.
and it kind of goes back to that. I want to honor the validity of other human beings and not just like forget about it or discard it because it's not part of my current experience, or like, oh, this is a new party and we're not having a conversation. So like
Yeah.
it doesn't do anything for me you know, to worry about you right now. No, I want to keep those experiences alive and keep that like the human interaction validity alive. It's really important to me.
Beautiful, as it should for every human being, because every human being's a human being, and they deserve to be treated as one. So it's
Yeah.
beautiful that
Yeah.
you hold that close to your heart. Um, I I wanted to talk a bit about the Fitbit or the Fit Body Fusion,
Mhm.
and how you incorporate what is that what did you do there, how did it help out with your physicality, did you train
Mm.
people, and how do you incorporate that in a healthy lifestyle,
Oh man,
because you
it's a
you
lot of great questions on that topic.
because you keep a very good physique, and a lot of people struggle with it, especially you're 46, correct?
Mhm.
At your age, like have hard time like keeping up with that. Like how do you like do you have a regiment? Do you like what do you do?
Um, well, I'm gonna go back to the how did I get into that?
Yeah.
So I mentioned that I was briefly married,
Mm-hmm.
right, at about 34, and I
The skinny
married
mini.
I married a person. What did you say?
The
What'd you call her?
skinny mini.
Yeah, a skinny mini. Just long enough to have to undo it legally, right?
Right.
Um, but the person that I was in a relationship with was like a bodybuilding competitor at the bikini level,
Ah,
and
there goes the dysmorphia and all that. Yeah.
well, that wasn't that person.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that was the witness marriage when I was really young. But
Gotcha.
yeah, so I would say that in that industry, it's not always healthy.
Yeah.
There are a lot of performance enhancers that maybe people feel required to do to keep up,
Yeah.
and to stay relevant in that industry. If you're like a personality or if you're a competitor, which I have never been a competitor, and wasn't really interested in
Yeah.
that depth of that lifestyle. It's
That's
really
it.
hard on you,
It
right?
becomes very unhealthy. Yeah.
And
Or it
I
can.
I have seen a lot of people, you to show up on stage at a competition, you are at your least healthy point.
Yep.
You're completely unfed and unwatered and all of these things, and that is when you get the most accolades if you win.
Yeah.
What a terrible reward
How far
model,
can you put your body
Yeah.
into the I
Yeah.
mean, through the most shit and into the shit, to get rewarded for it.
But also, hey, is it amazing that somebody can do that with their body and
Yeah.
come out on top? Yes,
Yeah.
also amazing, right? So I want to acknowledge
Absolutely.
both. But also, I've seen people bounce back from that and totally binge eat, explode their weight, try to stop it and eat out of the trash can, like I've seen some things in that,
Yeah.
and so uh, that particular role is not an interest to me per se, because I like to have a little bit more moderation,
Yeah.
in the way that I do things. But what was cool was, while I was with her, I really started to, like, I used to do like CrossFit kind of stuff, and I
Mhm.
ended up severing my Achilles. And so I wanted to do things with less impact. I started like weight training, and when I was with her, I started doing it with a lot more regularity. And I really liked the way that it, made my body look. And I can say, pretty clearly, like, you don't just go from having uh, no self-esteem to just getting it back because you're out of the environment. I still, to this day, have negative messages in my head about myself,
Yeah.
maybe even fairly regularly,
Yeah.
right? And so acknowledging that, do I do something to combat it on a regular basis? That way I'm not at the whim of those messages,
Yeah.
And so for me, I like to exercise regularly because it at least gives me a way to be like, shut the fuck up messages.
Yeah.
I'm doing my best, or I like the way I look, or even to push myself a little harder and be like, oh, I'm really like getting the best out of this routine or something like that. And
Yeah.
so I like that during that time, it introduced some like regularity and discipline. And then also, I was doing the counting macronutrients, where you kind of like list like what is the fat,
Carbohydrates.
carbs,
Yeah.
and protein and all of these things.
Yep.
Well, now when I look at food, I have a rough template in my head of like, what's the damage here? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it helps me consider what I put in my body better.
Yeah.
Like, just knowing like what is the fat content of peanut butter, and how much of it can I get away with, love it as I do, right? Just
Yeah.
it gives me knowledge about food. And so now I don't track in any way, shape, or form, but the data is in there.
Yeah.
And so it affects the choices that I make. Sometimes I might still eat that donut when somebody brings them in at work, but like maybe I'm just going to cut it in half, or, cut a quarter out of it, or
Yeah.
like actually I skipped breakfast and maybe I'm going to have the
I'm
whole
eat the
thing,
whole
right?
damn
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
So I try to be moderate about it. I
Yeah.
don't try to like really like make myself unhappy.
Yeah.
And so I would say the best thing for me is the regularity. Kind of like once you've developed a certain amount of muscle, maintaining it
Mhm.
is easier than like putting on a ton of new muscle. And so I'm glad I put some on at that time when I was really more regimented or strict.
Yeah.
And now I kind of like modulated down to a couple days a week and realized that wasn't cutting it. I wasn't even maintaining. And so kind of had to like turn it up a notch again.
Yeah.
I mostly have like trained myself and, created my own programs. Um, but just recently, I re engaged with a personal trainer to like give me a new program that maybe would be just something different, let me learn somebody else's, concepts,
Yeah.
and then also, have them push me harder, like get that last rep, your form is crappy. That way when I, and I'm not going to do it for a really long time, but it'll like re-up that. Am I working my hardest? Am I thinking about my form? Like when you have someone outside your body holding you accountable, it like reminds you how
Yeah.
to be accountable internally. And
Absolutely.
so I thought I would like re-engage with that for a little bit. I am finding it harder to maintain. And you know what? When I'm 50 or when I'm 54, it's just going to get harder. But I am paying attention.
Yeah.
I am, looking in the mirror. I do want to look at myself and say, this is good. But at the same time, I have to figure out like it won't be the same forever.
Yeah.
I can't have, I mean, I could have muscles when I'm 90, I suppose, but it's not common, folks,
Right.
right? And so I also consider like, how am I going to reconcile my beauty, or to quantify my beauty as a person, to myself as I get older and older?
Yeah.
It can't be as tied to my body. It can't be as tied to sex. right? Like, how do I define my value and beauty as a partner and a being? Or like when somebody meets me, like, hey, some of my burn outfits are a little bit skimpy because I've been working out and I want to feel
You
good,
show it
right?
off.
Yeah. It's not going to be that forever.
No.
And so like how will I then be like, "Oh, but look how interesting I am. Don't you want to know this person, don't you?" Like that's also beautiful. And I've been at a burn and there was a lady that probably was like in her 70s, with like silver dreadlocks and really cool clothes that probably she made and cool jewelry, and I was just like, that lady is beautiful and looks so interesting.
Mhm.
I want that for myself as I age, to like really have a handle on what the beauty of a human being is past just those things.
Mhm.
But right now, well, I got them. I'm using that stuff and I want it, and I want to improve. I want to put great messages in my head about how I look for
Yeah.
as long as I can. You know what I mean? Like I want that.
I mean, to be honest with you, like I think it was Sagman last year. Uh, a friend of mine that is I believe she's in her mid 60s, early 70s. Um, just so confident, just exudes confidence and just doesn't give a fuck, you know? Just such a beautiful human being in and out. Like I felt a deeper connection and love towards that person. And I like it felt right at the moment to really kiss and actually go further than just a kiss,
Yeah.
and really
Like you're
engage
like,
with it.
I am attracted to this
I am
person. Yeah.
attracted to you
Yeah.
for who you are and the confidence that you exude as a woman and as a person. And like I'd never had that experience before with somebody of that age, but just because of their confidence and how, because that's how I kind of that is kind of who I am. Like I don't care if you like me or if you don't like me. I'm going to be who I am regardless of how you feel about me.
Hmm.
But I will show you love and I will still embrace you, uh how I embrace every single person
Yeah.
with love and
Yeah.
approachability. Embrace. So
Yeah, I appreciate that too, and I like that word that you said. Attraction. Like, what does it mean to be attractive? Like, is that the body, the face? Is it beauty? Is it And I think that concept of like attractive is like, this magnet tells this magnet come over here,
right.
and what is that related to? And so I like that concept of like, I want to be attractive, an attractive old man where there's a particular magnetism to me that makes people want to get a little bit closer. Like I want that for myself, and I don't want to in the future, right? I'm still about it, but I don't want to get hung up on being like, oh, I can't look how I wanted to look anymore. Like, I can't wear sexy outfits. Like, am I even valid? And like, I recognize that in myself as a place where I could get hung up because of how I've thought about myself in the past. And like, it really mattered whether I was sexy or not. Well, you know what? In your fucking marriage, it should, right? You want that person to want you. And so like I just I bring my awareness to that internal feeling of where I am in the stream of time, so that I can continue to process that, even if it has some old news or unpleasantness, so that in the future, that awareness brings me something really important that I can add to. Like, I thought about this topic, and now that I'm old, I know exactly what I want to do in my shoes right now. And so I continue to work on that, for myself.
It's a beautiful
when
perspective.
when I was coaching, I coached people for like 6 years. I coached mostly in the like lifestyle segment, not the pineapple lifestyle, but
I was
like
gonna say, yeah.
lifestyle is like you're not trying to be a bodybuilder or compete. You just want to maintain a healthy lifestyle and healthy physique. And so it was less intense. When training people into competitions takes a real understanding of like you might be doing carb loading and removal and pulling water and all of these things. And like, as a person who didn't compete, I wouldn't want to tell someone how to do something that I had never done, right?
Right.
But figuring out how to eat for your body, how to manipulate your metabolism, figure out what your metabolism even was doing or wanted to do, right? And then put together really challenging workout programs and feed the body according to those programs or towards their goals of getting bigger, smaller,
Yeah.
or both. Um, and so I really enjoyed that, and it interacting with people in that space gave me again a lot of you know forced me to do the research, put in time, test things myself, pay attention to how something worked for somebody's body that maybe was different from how it worked for this person, and be
Yeah.
like, you can't just put a template on everything.
Correct.
And so that was really great experience for me, and again, kind of centered more around the like I don't want to say like moderate because it's hard work to
Yeah.
eat right and be fit. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm glad
Mentally
that
and
I
physically.
interacted with that space because it has helped me now as I'm just doing myself, to continue to challenge myself, to continue to pay attention to particular markers, to watch my progress, or even, there's some times where me and my wife will go to the gym and like, I'm your trainer today. And that's really fun, to really know what I'm doing and, to do something challenging and stuff like that. I dig it.
That's beautiful. I've I've yet to experience that in a relationship, and I would love to have that in one of my own relationships. Um, but bringing up, so
Ooh, I want to add something actually. And I feel this, I'm adding it because it's a taboo a little bit.
let's
Um,
go.
so TRT, right? I
You know,
at
break that down for people.
Yeah, so that's like testosterone replacement therapy.
Hmm.
At a particular time in life, I was feeling way just like more sluggish, less, desire, etc. And so I went and got my testosterone levels checked because my dad had had low testosterone, and they were in the like something in the like 300 range. And the reason I'm putting that number out there is the acceptable range of testosterone, it's like 300 to 900
Yep.
whatever mpg per ml, I don't know, but 300 to
Yeah.
900, right? And so my doctor was like, it's fine, you're in the acceptable range. And I was like, in my head, are you telling me that I could have 3 times the amount of testosterone and that also would be acceptable?
Acceptable.
Because you know what? I do want 3 times this amount of
Yeah.
testosterone. And so I went to like a men's health clinic instead,
Yeah.
and they were like, yes, here's a routine that will optimize that, and you'll kind of be running at the higher end of the spectrum, and that sounds great to me. And I that would be like, I feel like some guys don't like to talk about that, and they don't want to be like, oh yeah, I'm on testosterone. Well, I fucking am.
Yeah.
And that would be like, I don't grow muscles just by being me. I have to go to the gym.
You have to work
And
hard for them.
yeah, so if I want to be energetic and I want to maintain my level of desire or whatever, and I can get it from a bottle, I'm going to go get it out of that bottle.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that is really important, and it's like not a knock. And so when you said regimen,
Hmm.
I don't want to exclude that, because even in the bodybuilding world, nobody wants to be like, oh yeah, I used a X and Y performance enhancer, because somebody will be like, oh, that invalidates all of the work that you did to become giant, right?
Yep.
Or it's like it's not real. And so if I wouldn't say that anybody is looking at my version of masculinity or my sexual energy and being like, it's not real. This is me,
Yeah.
and even if I am supplemented by a doctor, good for me. And I'll continue to do that in the future. In fact, as long as I can, because I do want to be optimized, right?
It's just
There's a
a
hundred things I would do to be optimized.
very good way to put it is the optimization of who you already are, not something that's changing you, but something that is only enhancing what already exists. I found when I was after I broke my neck and my back, and I couldn't move my body for a number of months. that I had gained. I went from like 225 pounds to 315 pounds, and I went back to where my body was when I got out of high school. And uh, my body wasn't producing testosterone like it was because it was stagnant. And my testosterone levels came back at like 115 or 120, and which is pretty low.
Mm.
And that was the first time where I was prescribed testosterone, and that was my first like initiation into it, and it was just like, whoa. Like, I went from not having energy, not having any drive, like not like, because it was my testosterone had stopped producing, at that point. Just because I wasn't moving, I wasn't doing the things I was doing. I was still trying to eat the foods that I could, but like you sit there and you don't do anything. You eat and you eat and you eat, but to get the testosterone going, sometimes you actually need to jump start it and get that started. And to this day, I can get it up to about 300, 350 naturally. But it's when you get that up to those up above like 500, 600,
Hmm.
like it's a drastic change on your life,
Yeah.
and it's not unhealthy. It's a healthy change within your life that you're making and you're choosing to make, that really enhances your life. It's kind of like drinking
Definitely.
it's kind of like drinking tap water, or drinking alkaline water with a sprinkle of Himalayan salt and some lemon, you know?
Yeah, would you do it better if you could? And I think that for a lot of guys, they'd rather not even know maybe where their hormone levels are, and they're like, I don't want to get on testosterone.
Yeah.
Why?
I had my dad go get his testosterone levels
Yeah.
checked, and he was at like 10. Like his testosterone was at
Wow.
10. Like I'm like women their natural testosterone is like between 2 and 6. So he was right there with a
Yeah.
woman's testosterone levels, even lower than that sometimes. But like, because he didn't have drive, he didn't have energy, and I'm like, you need to go get your testosterone checked, because this could be a huge thing. Now he's on testosterone, like I can see how much more energy he has, how
Yeah.
much more excited he is to do things, how much more engaging the conversations with him and my mother are, like, and with me as well, and being able to like, hey, we have something relatable. Like, no, I don't feel like a son to him, as much as I do, like a friend to him now,
Yeah. That's
because
really cool.
yeah, it's a pretty cool experience to get to
Share with
yeah,
somebody.
yeah,
Yeah, I would even say, like, kind of going back to the sex coaching world, um, I talk to a lot of people who are experiencing like erectile dysfunction for some reason, whatever way, shape, or form. And oftentimes, hey, there's a lot of reasons that could be happening, but one of the first boxes that you can just check is,
low T,
how are you doing from a health standpoint, and
yeah,
where are your hormones, right? And so that is my first recommendation to anybody in that world. Check the box of knowing that it is not your health or your hormones, right?
yeah,
And see where your testosterone is. And if it's that easy to just be like, this thing is not working how I wanted to, and then get on a regimen, and now it is,
yeah.
like, how great for you.
And also on the other side of the spectrum, when it comes to low T and testosterone, um, it is it is a slippery slope, when you're not when you go to a men's health place and you get checked regularly. Like, that's something that can be regulated, and you can keep at a healthy level.
Hmm.
It's when you decide to take things into your own hands and go outside of the norm or the tested things, and that's where you can have those, the anger or rage problems, is when you're treating it with, like, say you break your ankle and you take some opiates. um are you getting away from the pain, or are you now just addicted to it, and now you just want to feel numb? But with the testosterone, is like you're you start wanting to feel more and more and more because now you've got all this energy and everything. Um, so it's important to make sure that you're getting your testosterone levels checked and you're on a healthy, you're not up above 1,000. You're not, you know, anger, rage,
Yeah.
or just over exuberant with things. So definitely on both sides of the spectrum, whether you're too low or too high, it's important to have a doctor to be able to test those.
Yeah, and to be honest, right? So going back to the bodybuilding community, there's there's black market everything. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And so if you want to have your testosterone for $50 a bottle instead of $250 a bottle, there's somebody out there that will do it for you.
Yeah.
But that person is not going to, check your estrogen levels and do all of those things.
That's right.
And so I would say to anybody that finds themselves in that space, are you actually educated enough to be your doctor in that space? Do you know where your levels should be? Do you know all of the things that are affected by testosterone use? There are You can request online, like you could pay for an estrogen blood test,
Yep.
right? And just go find out where your estrogen levels are.
Yeah.
But if you're doing that, do you do that? Or,
Yeah.
is it just estrogen or are there other things that are affected? And so I would say, yeah, it's really easy to want to take that into your own hands. It's really easy to be like, well, this doctor will only give me so much, but if I did a little more, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you really know what is behind all of that? I would say there's a lot of research that would have to go into it before a person would say, I'm doing my own version of this journey.
Yeah, that's like back in the day I used to help out like when I first broke my neck and back. I used to help friends out with like testosterone and stuff like that because I knew a lot of people that were in bodybuilding. I grew up learning everything I know from power lifters and bodybuilders. So I knew a lot of people that were in that thing. And then after I broke my neck and back, like I needed that replacement, so I knew who to go to get that black market kind of thing,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
make sure it was a tested, reliable source,
Right.
you know. But then like I found out way too early on that I hooked up a friend with it, and he's like, I can see him physically changing, but also his temperament had changed, and I'm like, because I was like, "Have you gotten your testosterone checked to see what your levels are?" And he's like, "No, no, but I feel great," you know?
Yeah.
And like that was the first increment that I got, or uh sign that I got that, okay, this is more than just an enhancement thing. This needs to be controlled. And then I stopped giving it to him because as until he got his testosterone checked. I'm like, you need to go get your testosterone checked because I think it's way too high right now. So it's important to make sure, if it's not every 3, I get my blood checked every 3 months. At least get it every 6 months.
Mhm.
That helps out a lot, especially with your vitamins and your nutrients, making sure that you're getting the proper intake and you have you're balanced in all of your vitamins and your nutrients that your body's needing or not needing, but super important.
Yeah, definitely. And as a person who has also done it, on their own at some point, like those blood tests aren't even that expensive.
Yeah.
If you just wanted to get your estrogen checked, it's like
50
60,
bucks.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cheap. And so I think doing your due diligence in that space is not that difficult.
Yeah.
You just have to have the knowledge to back it up. And
If you're willing
similarly,
to
I
stick
would,
a needle in a substance that's not even tested into your body, like
yeah,
at
at
least go on the
least
other
do the due
side
diligence.
and at
Yeah.
least see what your blood is testing.
Yeah.
But I think that's a healthy note to wrap things up for people. And I really want to extend my arms and give you a hug, and
Yeah.
um, I love you.
I'll be right back. Thank you so much.
And I appreciate you so much. And just I want people to know how important it is to embrace the people that you love and the time that you get to share with those people because they're not always going to be there.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So I love you.
I'll be right back.
Thank you for being here. This also is a great way for everybody to balance your cortisol levels
Yeah, right.
and to calm somebody down there when they may be too invigorated in life or need to. If somebody just needs to, you need to settle them down a bit. It's just hold and embrace them and let them their heartbeats beat with yours.
I wanted to ask you, like, on the education side, what do you think about when you hug a person? You know what I mean? Like, where do you go? And of course, it's different person to person and how well you know them. But like, is there a baseline of like, here's, like, for instance, I will, kind of like in this hug, I'm like, am I really feeling this? You know what I mean? Am I really accepting that I'm being hugged by someone who cares about me? What does that mean and how does it make me feel? Right. And so I will stop and think about that and not just be like, pat, we hugged to check the box, but like,
So
do you
let's
have a thing that you think about?
let's sit back down and talk about it a bit.
Okay.
Hugging
You
is
guys thought you were getting out of this thing.
yeah,
It's not that easy.
not so much. So hugging is something that I didn't get too much like growing up. I didn't have friends that, we would hug or anything like that. Um until I was older, I'd say. Till I went through, um until I started giving people hugs and understanding what it did to me and the chemical change that I felt when I received a hug or got a hug. That's when I started giving more hugs. And I think it didn't I didn't start holding on to people and like embracing and like giving the people what they needed. Um and I didn't understand that energy exchange. It it probably didn't come until after I broke my neck. And I started going traveling around different countries. To where people I had foreigners embracing me and hugging me and like really holding on though.
Yeah.
And that's when I felt that I really felt like my hair's rising, my heartbeat slowing, um uh feelings of vulnerability and being able to like feel like I can have a conversation with them even though it's kind of like a universal language.
Yeah.
You don't have to speak their language to be able to accept a hug,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know?
to be like, I'm here with gratitude, love,
Yeah.
peace. I want to see you. You
Yeah.
could say that all in a hug.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I think that's where it came from was like living in the United States and trying to, show people or give people what I didn't have growing up when I was younger, just by a simple hug or a simple gesture or anything like that. And then finally bringing it around to like going to other cultures where that's a norm, and getting embraced and getting to feel that to where it really actually I started encompassing it on a like a on a much more regular basis with everybody that I possibly can, because it really can change um a person's entire day, month, year, life, just with a simple hug.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I would just even kind of mirror like that is my first thought is kind of like to look at self and be like, am I really experiencing the meaning of this hug? And that just puts me there longer. And then the experience of the other person is that like, well, here we still are, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
like, it's just awesome. I think that's really cool. Maybe sometimes like I don't really stress about like if I have an outbound message to say, like I'm not trying to like cram some meaning down their throat with a hug or anything like that.
yeah,
I just really want it to be real. And I want to think to myself, am I, experiencing like the honor of this person and do I feel close to them? It's a really easy place to start, and then there you are a minute later or more, and it feels really special.
yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for sharing it with me.
Yeah, you bet.
I love you.
I'll be right back. Thank you. Mhm.
Thank you everybody for joining us on New Life Podcast, and we'll talk to you next time.